So the last video going into the expansion of the standardization of humanity, consciousness, evolution and revolution was really going into how the standardization effect works on people, society, and the way we interact. But one thing I didn't go into in much detail is the standardization of how we think. I kind of glazed over it a little bit in reference to how we see ourselves, this standard approach to how we see other people, like so-called white people, and then how society views so-called black people and so on and so forth. There's a standard of human out there that creates this relationship that we have with other people and that we have with ourselves. We see ourselves a certain way. We treat ourselves a certain way. We raise our children a certain way. We educate ourselves a certain way. We hold ourselves to certain standards because of the standard that is placed out there for us to hold ourselves against. And those standards that have been put out there, just like all this other stuff that's put out there for our so-called benefit, is actually out there to work against us. And very briefly, like I said in the last video, the standards are put out there to maintain the system itself. And in order to maintain the system, you have to have an example of what that standard is. Because the main thing that is used to enslave people is their own minds. So in order to enslave the people's minds, you have to separate them from their own power, how they see themselves, how they see their ancestors, their connection to the ancestors, their connections to what the ancestors were connected to, the land, the resources, the spirit. So everything had to be revamped. This is why there's a standard of religion. There's a standard of intellect. There's a standard of relationships. There's a standard of history. There's a standard of entertainment. There's a standard of education. And there's a standard of thought, which is what I want to go into with this video. The standardization of the mind and thought itself. And like I said in reference to the last video, in order to have a standard, you have to have an example of that standard. So the way we interact in society has been divvied up. We have been divided by this idea of race, an invention. And that invention was created to create separation, one above the other, white over the black. And since it's not as simple as white versus black, you have various so-called races of people who are treated differently. This is why in the world you have white is all right, brown stick around, yellow is mellow, and black stay back. This is a mentality that's been around for generations. And that stems from the original separation, the original division of the invention of seeing ourselves as these various races. Because like any other thing that goes on, if you want to see who's behind or what's behind a certain event that's going on, you have to see who profits from this mindset, from this event. So we can all understand, outside of the complexities, the details of the system of racism and white supremacy, who profits from the system of racism in general. You don't even have to call it white supremacy, just racism in general. Who profits there? Who benefits the most? And who takes it on the chin the most? And this is corroborated with society itself. Look at your politics, look at your education system, look at history. It's one-sided. It destroys our history, the truth of what happened, and inflates the history of so-called white people. Your teachers, your entertainers, your politicians, your leaders, your idols, they're all elevated, while our leaders are literally assassinated. They're taken out, they're brought down, they're discredited in some kind of way. And in reference to the standardization of the mind and thought, the epicenter of that standardized mentality is the education system, and even more specifically, the university system, because this is where your ongoing thought, your ongoing philosophy comes from. This is where the implanting of future programs comes about. So your technology is founded based in the intellect of the university system. Elon Musk got to where he is from doing what? From being smart within the system in some kind of way. Even if it wasn't directly in the system, he got his intelligence, which is mirrored with the intelligence of the university system. All these other idols that are out there, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, your politicians, who are all lawyers. Lawyers get their approval from what? From going to school, the university system. So those belief systems within that standardization of intellect, thought, of the mind, just like I said in reference to putting one over the other, white over the black, the university intellect was used to put Western intelligence, Western perspectives over what they call Eastern perspectives or ancestral perspectives. And what comes along with that? What comes along with that is the putting of stuff like science, which is not true science, because Eastern and ancestral perspectives are very scientific. There's a balance between the science and the spirit. And this is another thing the standardization does. It demonizes whatever it's put up against while also discrediting the details of whatever it's put up against. So by the university system focusing only on the idea of science, this discredits the reality of spirit and the science within that spirit. So once you do that, you actually discredit entire people. So the people who were and are following the spirit, following the ancient sciences, nothing that they say, nothing that they believe, nothing that they are a part of matters anymore. Because when you tie in evolution, which is standardization through time, that confirms that whatever's happening now is not only an extension of what happened in the past, but is exponentially better than what has happened in the past. This is what this linear thought of an artificial science perspective does to the way we see ourselves, the way we think, the way we interact. This is why monkey evolution, the Big Bang, the timeline itself, through heliocentrism, is such a big deal. And you can see how it's all intertwined. The institution, the university system, feeds itself with these theories. It created this artificial foundation that it can't go back on in order to project itself into future illusions. This is why the idea of the not heliocentric universe is such a threat, attacking the Big Bang, the theories, all the theories, the gravity theory, the relativity theories, the evolution theory, the dinosaur theory. All of these artificial belief systems are at the base of standardizing the mind. And the university system is the machine that pumps this stuff out. So in comparison to the two videos that I'm putting out right now, breaking this down, you can see the standardization of the mind through the university system as the machine, and the standardizing of revolution, evolution, consciousness, and humanity itself are the products that that machine pump out. And you can see the system as a product itself, because the inventing of the idea is the machine, but the machine that lives inside of us, that we protect, that we run and have our children run. When you send your children to school, they're running that machine of standardization. And when they live their lives, they're pumping out the product of that machine through their beliefs, through their arguments, through their voting, through everything that this society says that you need to be a part of. Their religious beliefs, their scientific beliefs, their ancestral beliefs, how they project themselves into the future, how they see time and experience time, how they see life and experience life and death, the fear of death. All of these things that are relatively new in the timeline. Our ancestors had a different relationship with this reality overall. And the pumping out of that fear through time. All of these Big Bang, the dinosaurs, extinction, all that stuff, climate change, this is used to create this fear, because in that fear, you're anchoring people in the emotional body that keeps people dependent and unsure of themselves and in a state of fear. And when you're scared all the time, you need somebody to protect you, to lean on. And the system places itself out there as the standard to be that wall for you to lean on. The only thing is, when you're leaning on that wall, you're only going to be able to go and to grow as far as that wall allows you to go. So science itself has been put out there. The science of the university system, this is why people protect it so much. You don't believe in science? Like, it's a belief now. How dare you go against the science? The science is the new Christianity. You don't believe in Jesus? You don't follow Jesus? Like, it's become a thing that is unquestionable. Nobody questions Jesus. Nobody questions Newton. Nobody questions Copernicus. How dare you? Who are you? So science has become the absolute. This is how it's sold to you. And they put this in the movies, they put it in TV shows, your politicians. They're always saying this kind of stuff. I just saw this in a movie last night that I watched. What was it? Oh, Ghostbusters. The newest Ghostbusters. The one with the kids in it. And it's all about science. A lot of these movies are about that science promotion. So they have the child scientists, they have the Ghostbusters who are scientists, and you have the comedian guy who's a scientist too. Paul Rudd, he's the teacher scientist in there. He's like a seismologist. So he has to explain to the mother that, science is so great. What do you mean? And that whole mentality of science is this, when they put pictures like cartoon images of space in kindergarten classes and all that other stuff, and giant dinosaurs and all this stuff. This is to have an effect on you. And that same effect is the same effect that someone like Paul Rudd had, who's also an Avenger. So he's like a superhero. He's an approval. He has the backing of the Avengers behind him. This is all subconscious and conscious. That's all they need. They're the standard of thought. They're the approving standard of reality. So when he goes on a date with the mother of the main characters in there, he's elevating the idea of science. Science is great. Oh my God. And it's so basic. It's so general that that's all you really need, because it's emphasizing the standard of how you experience reality. And one thing he says in there about science is, the best thing about science is that it's absolute. There's no questioning it. And when they say that, they're not saying that about science itself. They're saying that about the institution of science. Because science itself is different than the institution of science. But when you just say science is absolute, because true science is coming from our ancestral science, the sciences of the shit that they can't understand, all those ancient buildings that were put together by our ancestors that they just pushed to the side and nowadays say aliens did it. This is why they have ancient aliens out there. I've said this in previous videos. The ancient alien belief system is to discredit our relationship with this reality in order to emphasize their belief systems within this reality. So they'll go as far, just to discredit us, they'll go as far as bringing in fairy tale creatures in order to not only demonize and discredit our abilities, our intelligence of our ancestors, but to add a basis or a belief, a deeper belief in how they see what's going on, the future programming. So we all know the extraterrestrial alien belief system is part of it because it's anchored in the New Age system, which is anchored in the New World Order. So ancient aliens is in between all of that stuff to be the scientific balance point of conspiracy theorists and institutional scientists. So this is why when they see the pyramids, they see Sacsayhuaman, Machu Picchu, all these things that have been going on in the past, they say, well, since the ancient people were just dumb savages, and us, the white people, are the smartest, intelligent people of the world, since we can't do it today, and the people of the past, anchoring in the monkey evolution program again, the people of the past, of course they couldn't do it. They were savages. This is them anchoring in that racist bullshit again. They couldn't do it. It must have been aliens. And they go to the alien belief system because they're selling you the alien agenda. And they can say that and they can make you believe that because they're the standard of thought. They're the standard of reality. And their science is absolute. So like I said, when Paul Rudd says something like that, he's saying the beliefs, the way we see the reality is absolute. Our theories are absolute. And when you say things like that to children, you're affecting generations. Like I mentioned in previous video about the interview with Venus Williams, and where the father goes off because the interviewer keeps asking Venus, what makes you so confident? What makes you think you could beat this world champion or whatever it was? He keeps questioning her after she answers confidently. No, I know I can beat her. That's all there is. Oh, but really, what makes you? And he steps in and says, "Look, she gave you the answer. Move on. You're dealing with the mind of a child, and just having an adult question the confidence of a child like that could possibly have very detrimental effects because they have the authority of just being older. That comes with a certain amount of intelligence, and that intelligence in a child's mind can trump whatever it is that they're thinking about. And then she'll start thinking, really, what makes me so confident? Could I possibly lose? And that whole thing starts to spiral because that's what happens in the mind of a child. Even adults do this. Well, adults nowadays have the mind of a child. So this is why adults are so easily influenced, because they're kept at that child mind mentality. But this is the thing. This is what I'm saying in reference to that. This is why they put that stuff in movies specifically that they know children are going to watch. They say things like science is absolute because that anchors them in the institutional brain. They don't question school. They don't question their teachers. They don't question what they're reading. When one of the Avengers says in another movie, oh, science is absolute. And then when you question them, when you call them on their bullshit, there's going to be people, scientists that are watching this right now, and they're going to say that shit. They're going to say, oh yeah, well he's just talking about like 1 + 1 = this, and this element plus this element creates this, and these atoms, they're going to go into that in order to deflect from the fact that there's a difference between true science, which is what our ancestors were tapping into and expressing, in the institutional science. So this is another narcissistic control mechanism to control the argument, control the narrative, to focus what you're talking about, to play the victim. He was just talking about this. He wasn't doing it. No, this is exactly what they were meaning. Institutional thought. And this is what all of these scientists, defenders do. It's the same way with like Christian defenders. Oh, well, the Bible really meant this. They weren't saying this, and they can bounce back and forth between metaphors and literal and all this other stuff. They can go back and forth in order to protect the institution of Christianity, just like the people go back and forth between defending the institution of so-called science. So the protecting, the defending, the amplifying of this system, like I said, is to feed itself. Focusing on the science makes the system focus on the standard of the people who built those institutions. So building up science builds up the system of racism and white supremacy, because who are the founders of that system? The same way, who are the founders of this new world? The United States. So if you see yourself as benefiting or a part of that system, you have to go along with everything that they are putting out there, for better or for worse. They love it. The wars, the jacked up food, the messed up education, the lies, so on and so forth. They have to either distract from it, project onto you for bringing a light to that, or celebrate it. And Christianity is basically the religious standard of thought in comparison to the university, which is the intellectual standard of thought. And it's defended and pitted up against other religions around the world just as the institution of science is against our ancestors and the spirit itself, or the science of the spirit itself. So Christianity is the standard of religion, science is the standard of reality, and so-called white people are the standard for humanity. And when you have those standards within those institutions, you just have to grow the belief systems and the thought and the interaction within those institutions. So one of the things in the intellectual institution is to amplify those systems. One thing I realized firsthand was, and I left college because of this, I wanted to be a writer or an English major. And one of the classes I took early on was philosophy. And on the first day, they go through everything that they're going to teach you in philosophy class. This was in community college. And hearing this professor go through this list of shit that I'm going to have to sit through for the next 3.5 months was just unbearable. I was just like, what the? This is what you call philosophy? I'm going to have to sit through all this shit and listen to this. It was just nothing but so-called white perspectives of reality. No other philosophy is accepted. Even the way you think, like your critical thought needs to be maintained, and a certain kind of critical thought needs to be elevated. And the university institution is at the epicenter of that. So this is a standardizing of critical thought, the so-called white philosophy, and putting that on a pedestal. Nowadays, a version of this that is very tangible that you can see every day is this standardizing of mainstream thought versus the conspiracy thought. And this is kind of crumbling down, just like the system of racism and white supremacy is crumbling down too at the same time. Because not only do people have access to the information that brings this stuff down, but people are starting to see that these mind control systems, standardized systems, are not for anybody's benefit other than the system itself. Look at what's going down now with the releasing of the information, the side effects of these vaccines that are out there, and why they wanted to hide that information for 75 years. By that time, everybody be dead already. But look at all that stuff that's connected to what they were selling to you, hardcore selling you. Get the vaccine, do this, give it to your kids, give it to your grandparents. Protect them. And now look at the side effects. And the same people that were selling it to you hard are silent. The mainstream media is silent when the side effects come out because they are a part, they are liable. They're accomplices to the crimes of these criminals who are pumping out those diseases. So the conspiracy theorist is demonized just as our ancestors are demonized to elevate the mentality of the standard mainstream thought, of the standard mentality. And even more within the conspiracy theory circle of communities, you can see how the idea of the not heliocentric universe, or specifically the flat earthers, are used to elevate heliocentrism. And I was guilty of using this term in a paper that I wrote years ago, years before I was looking into any of the flat earth information, using that term flat earther to talk about people who are dumb or who just think a certain way and can't get out of that mindset. They're just out of touch, out of reality. But the community now activated in real life is used. This is the same thing is happening. Oh, are you one of those flat earthers? Are you, well, what about this? Well, what about that? They're protecting that system. So it's used, that arrogance, that confidence of, well, what about this? That comes from being so bought into the standard of intellect that they can't think for themselves, that they're confident in the illusions put out there by this standardized system. And like I said, they can't do it unless they have examples of what not to be like. So the standard of whiteness is put out there to not be like so-called black people. The standard of heliocentrism is elevated in society, in science, all their theories. It's put out there to not be like flat earthers. And like I said in previous videos, it's the way you think. It's the why behind the hows and the whats of what's going on that really matters. Like I said, when those people who are talking about trying to dismiss you and project onto you about questioning heliocentrism, it's not so much about what they're talking about, because you know it's all bullshit. What they bring to the table is bullshit. But boats go over the curve, and what about going to the moon and all that stuff? No, you know that's bullshit. Not only because it's total make-believe garbage, but it's still existing in the what and the how. They're selling you what's and hows. When we start to bring down the system of heliocentrism and the standardization of intellect overall through the university system, you're going into why. Why would they do this? For control, for manipulation, for mind control, to make you control yourself. Because when you have people controlling themselves, you can amplify this division of haves and have-nots and keep people elevating themselves through this monetary system. And tools like racism are just one of the tools, like the mind controls of heliocentrism, that are used to maintain that growth through illusion. So I just wanted to expand upon that very important piece that might have got lost or not expanded upon enough in the previous video, because this perspective overall of standardization needed to be hashed out first and foremost for people to see with what the big parts of what's out there: humanity, evolution, revolution, consciousness. There's standards of all of those. There's a right way to do it. And when there's a right way to do it, when there's a right way to be, there's a wrong way to be. If there's a right way to be or a right way to be, then there's a wrong way to be. And just as there's a right way to be and a wrong way to be, there's a right way to think and a wrong way to think. And when these ways of interacting and thinking in society are accepted on a large scale, that's when you're going to have people trying to control other people and mind controlling themselves.